Welcome back to another M&S tutoring video, and in this video we're going to be learning about the water cycle. And the water cycle is basically a cycle that's involved in many of the ecosystems around the world, mostly every single ecosystem around the world that relies on water to be cycled throughout an ecosystem, from the form of transpiration, condensation, precipitation, and so on and so forth. Before we actually start this water cycle lesson, I want you to remember one thing is that energy is not recycled. However, water, carbon, and nitrogen are the only things that are. So energy from plants, any other organisms, energy that travels up and down the food chain is not recycled. But in this case, water, carbon, and nitrogen are. That's a really important thing to remember because a lot of the times people confuse energy um, with being an energy cycle. But energy in this case is never a cycle. It's rather a means of getting energy from another animal without having to recycle it over and over again. Um, so today we're going to be actually talking about the water cycle. So the water cycle consists of many different terminology, and this usually revolves around how the water gets to the oceans, to the forest, back into the clouds, and then precipitates down into the ground, and then back into the oceans, the clouds, and so on and so forth. So let's begin to analyze this water cycle over here. So as you can see in this water cycle that there is a mountain, there's a bunch of trees, and there's the ocean. And on top we have three different clouds. We have two condensation clouds, which get the water as a means of two different ways, both evaporation and transpiration, and one precipitation cloud, which rains off usually in the higher elevated areas. So, which in this case is a mountain range. So first of all, let's take a look at accumulation. Accumulation is basically a large body of water where a lot of water is actually stored, and accumulation is really important because a lot of the water is heated at the accumulation state. So heat is a really important factor to the actual evaporation. And as a large body of water is heated, a lot of it becomes to evaporate. So waters from lakes, anything from ponds to oceans, evaporates into water vapor. And since it's at a lower density, it goes up into the atmosphere. And as it reaches near the atmosphere where a lot of the clouds are formed, then condensation occurs. Condensation occurs when water vapor is in clouds, and it condenses into other smaller clouds formed of water vapor. So when this happens, it's important that um, the water is warm enough so that the condensation can occur. But if the water is too warm, right, there is always a risk of hurricanes and tornadoes due to the large amounts of water vapor, right? So after all that water is in the condensation stage, so here you have your little water droplets um, in your clouds, right? And just remember, they're not actually water droplets. They're actually in the form of water vapor as long as they're in the clouds, right? And as the water then reaches to a higher elevation, or near places, as the clouds reach to places of higher elevations, precipitation then occurs. And precipitation is when water from the atmosphere falls back to the ground as rain or snow. And rain or snow really depends on the temperature. If the temperature is below freezing, the water will usually fall to the ground as snow. And if the temperature is above zero, it'll fall to the ground as rain. So we've really gone through one of the main ways water can um, go get condensed and then offer precipitation in higher elevation areas, but we haven't looked at the transpiration. Transpiration is when the moisture from the leaves of the plants and trees goes to the atmosphere. So without actually having a large accumulation um, in a large body of water, and then that getting heated and turning into water vapor, a lot of the moisture and the water actually from the plants or dense forests actually then goes up into the clouds to become condensed. And transpiration is usually where a lot of our rainwater comes off. It really depends on where you're living. If you're living somewhere next to a large rainforest, then a lot of the precipitation water will be from the transpiration. And if you're living near a large body of water, like such as lakes or oceans, I know that here in Ontario, as I'm beside a lot of the Great Lakes, a lot of our precipitation water comes from Lake Ontario. So as the water from these rainforests goes up to the condensation stage, then the same process occurs when water vapor is condensed into clouds, and eventually when there's a lot of water vapor in the clouds, it then becomes to precipitate down to the ground in the form of rain or snow. So that has been the water cycle. Um, Everything in this video has to be remembered that energy is not recycled, but water, carbon, and nitrogen are. So all of this is basically a really big cycle where the same water is used over and over again in the same ecosystem, right? And it really works together really well, as all the water has a place, either condensing, evaporating, or transpirating back into the ground. One thing I forgot to mention is actually the subsurface, or the groundwater runoff or the underground runoff. And what happens in this is when water precipitates down to the earth, a lot of the water is actually brought from the ground underground back into large bodies of water, and this is where a lot of the accumulation happens. And a lot of the water is brought to lakes and rivers through subsurface or underground water runoff. Water on the ground or in the soil makes its way to a larger body of water. So that's all for this video, guys. I hope you learned something new about the water cycle. If you have any comments or concerns, please feel free to leave it down in the comment section below, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. And other than that, thanks for watching, guys.